the abortion issue in New South Wales, where in the next half hour or so there'll probably be a final vote about whether or not the system will be decriminalised, where abortions can happen up to 22 weeks with one doctor and you can go all the way with two. There's been some pushback today, including from the Attorney-General in New South Wales. Andrew Clennell is the state political reporter for the Australian newspaper, and he tells us a little earlier this evening about particularly the role of Mark Speakman. This is the Attorney-General, who is not on the side of those who want to loosen the laws. Instead, he wants common sense to prevail.
One interesting amendment he put in was that there has to be informed consent of the woman concerned, which seems pretty logical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And Gladys Berejiklian actually voted against that, but Mark Speakman was successful in that amendment. The argument out of Gladys and Brad Hazzard on that one is that it happens as a matter of course. Doctors always do that, but I mean, I think Speakman's argument is it's better to have it in legislation. So there have been other moves. Tanya Davies is the former mental health minister. She's in the right. She tried to bring, when there are tighter controls, from 22 to 20 weeks. That was defeated. So it's going to go where the Queensland legislation last year went at 22 weeks. And Speakman's done a couple other things around the edges, I guess. But one of the most telling comments from him today, Paul, was where he said, I voted with Kevin Connolly's amendment that this be sent off to committee for a month, and I really believe that's what should happen, he said, the Attorney-General. I mean, there's a state's chief law officer. He said more work needed to be put into the law. And I guess that's quite concerning. I mean, you're doing this for the first time in 119 years. You'd want to get it spot on, wouldn't you? And it just seems to have come across in a hodgepodge manner. And I think that's kind of damaged the Premier a bit.
Well, I've got to say, and I said it last night, and the difference between me, the fire-up man, and you, the straight journalist, is I can say I voted for the Liberal Party to be returned. I'm glad that Gladys Berejiklian won that election. But I am deeply, deeply disappointed that when she decided to plunge the state into this debate, she hasn't spoken to it publicly. It's all being done with the help of the Greens, with the help of Labor, not with the majority of people people elected to become the government. I still can't work out why is New South Wales going through this process and the Premier is not shepherding this process through the Parliament. Does she somehow think that accidentally nobody will notice that this has happened?
I think that was her intention, but it's too late. But the thing is, she couldn't make it a government bill because half the cabinet would have quit, including her Treasurer, Dominic Perrottet. They just wouldn't have worn it, Paul. So that was kind of her dilemma once she decided she wanted to do it. And Mark Latham's been out there on our website today suggesting that this must be a part of a deal with Alex Greenwich. She has a majority of 2 after all. He'd be an important independent were, a couple of by-elections to happen and the coalition to lose them. And the sense is that she thought back in March she might be a minority government. Most of us did. So at that time she cut the deal. Now, Berejiklian denies this, but I have to say this makes a fair bit of sense to me. I mean, why else would you pick the fight and then not even speak to it? I mean, you can sort of understand if she's picking the fight and then vehemently defending why she's doing it and advocating for it. You haven't seen that from the Premier. It's like she's dropped the bomb and run off.
Well, that's the thing. At least when Daniel Andrews decided to make euthanasia an issue in Victoria, he invoked his own father. He owned the issue all the way through. Let's talk about the upper house, because the upper house in New South Wales can be kind of kooky, but there's a lot more common sense there now, in my view, thanks to people like Mark Latham, who's there. What's your sense of that upper house? Because the upper house previously, when it's dealt with things like Zoe's Law, which is well known to everyone on this program, what we're talking about here, essentially Parliament knocked it back, and the upper house was a big reason behind that, because essentially the pro-abortion lobby was able to scare the horses. Look, this thing's going to get through, but how tight do you think it'll be upstairs as opposed to how it's going to squeak it through downstairs with the help of Labor and the Greens and not that many Libs?
Well, it was always said to me that it'd be a tighter contest in the Legislative Assembly. So I think upstairs it will be pretty comfortable. And one of the people, a lot of the MPs really pushing it in this so-called cross-party group involved with Alex Greenwich, people like National, Trevor Khan, Labor's Penny Sharp, they're all in the upper house. So I've heard the shooters, fishers and farmers are supporting it tonight. That's what I heard. So that's interesting and unusual. Obviously, Fred Noel and Mark Latham will oppose it. Latham says it's rush legislation. Hard to disagree with that at this point. But there are enough Labor people there, with the exception of the likes of the Catholic Right and Greg Donnelly, who will support it, enough Nationals who will support it, and about half the Liberals. Again, it was put to me today that it'll be 6-5 against for the Liberals, but there's enough Liberals there with the Nats and Labor to get it through. And there's Greens and Animal Justice from the left as well. So I don't think it'll be a problem in terms of its passage through the upper house. But again, Gladys Berejiklian, I can't remember ever seeing this. You have a situation where a conscience vote passes the parliament, you as Premier support it, but the majority of your party oppose it. I mean, you might not be able to say that about the coalition, but her party, the Liberal Party, oppose it. And I must admit, I can't really see no repercussions down the line for the Premier in this one. I think this could be a seminal moment. Maybe it will just slip through and be forgotten about, but with some of these ministers in here and their views, I think in a couple of years' time we'll reflect back on this debate as a pretty big moment.